and welcome to Seeking Alpha Interviews. I'm Jane King at the NASDAQ market site in Times Square, and with me today, Eric Parnell of Garing Capital, who is also a Seeking Alpha contributor. Welcome, Eric.
Oh, hey.
Okay,
Hi, Jane. How are
so
you?
we are going to talk about the election.
Right.
A lot to unpack here. Oh my goodness, the world changed.
Absolutely.
And just a matter of weeks. Where do I even start? I guess let's start with just some of the huge moves that we've seen. Greek shipping, biotech, infrastructure stocks. I mean, how do you analyze all of this activity that's been going on?
Well, it's really been extraordinary because you had that reaction the night of the election, but as the hours passed and the reality set in, we really saw the world transform more towards expectations about these pro-growth policies that the markets have been so excited about, and they've moved to all-time highs since then. So, but one of the things that's really notable is that there's as you mentioned, there's so many different moving parts, not only within the stock market, but outside of the stock market. And one of the things that's been interesting so far is that the signals that we've been getting from the different categories telling different stories in terms of what they're expecting, not only from the new administration, but the next 6 months to a year ahead.
Can you decipher any of that? Is there any headline here?
Well, one of the headlines is that there is enthusiasm. There is a real belief that the long-awaited fiscal policy, that cyclical recovery, a lot of investors are anticipating that that's now going to be a reality. That's coming. The one question and the one caution that I think is wise for investors to have is that the movement in the market has been so fast and so furious. There's essentially an assumption that all of those things will happen. But there's going to be a long trip between the new administration coming into power and starting to implement these programs and what actually gets put in place at some point down the road. And some of those things that the market may think is going to happen may look very different once we get to that point.
That's true. And we've seen some of these moves have just been extraordinary.
Right.
1,500%, some of these Greek shipping companies.
Sure.
What has staying power? Of all the things that we've seen move, what really would be something that could be a long-term investment?
I really think it goes back to the things that always work over time. Earnings predictability, growth, high quality, sustainable yield. The things that have always worked will be the things that continue to work. Because although there is excitement about pro-growth, we are not without risks in the current market environment. We're going on the 8th year of a market recovery from the financial crisis. There have been a lot of aggressive policies, particularly on the monetary policy side, that have been put in place to help propel the markets to where they are today that haven't been supported by economic growth. So while it's good for investors to be enthusiastic, to be optimistic, and to capitalize on the opportunities that the market's presenting, it's also worthwhile to continue to emphasize the things that work over time. Quality, income, earnings predictability, financial strength, because those are the things that are proven over time.
Yeah, just take a deep breath.
Absolutely.
Look at the fundamentals. Now we'll also have a Republican Congress.
Right.
How do you see that playing into economic growth?
Well, there's been policies that the Republicans in the House and the Republicans in the Senate have been eager to put in place for a long time. Some of those pro-growth policies harken back to Reagan-era type economics. So one of the things that we'll definitely have is a contrast going forward to some of the policies that we've seen over the last 8 years under a Democratic administration. Just as we saw with the Reagan administration and their pro-growth policies in the early 1980s, we're likely to see those same types of growing pains with the pro-growth policies that the current Republican House and Congress wants to put in place. Because that handoff from dependence on monetary policy to that fiscal policy lead, there's likely to be some bumps associated with that.
And that's probably been the major, if there was one change that you had to summarize all this, was we're going from Fed-controlled money supply to actually some government stimulus, government stimulus here. So that's the big change that we've seen.
Sure, and there's a transition associated with that because that will open the door. The Fed has been eager to normalize interest rates for so long, and that will open the door for them to begin to normalize interest rates, and there will be an adjustment associated with that.
So are there any sectors that you like over the next, say, 12 months?
I think some of the opportunities that have been opened up, believe it or not, in some of the more defensive sectors, they've been sold off really going back to July, and that sell-off has accelerated since the election. So you have more defensive sectors like consumer staples, like utilities, that offer attractive yields. That chase for yield is not going away anytime soon. That will continue to persist. And one of the things that's been notable with the sell-off, that whoosh higher in the cyclical names has opened up some opportunities, some value opportunities in the more defensive areas. Pharmaceuticals is another area that has, had struggled going into the election, has rallied some, but there's still some attractive value there as well.
Yeah, and not just growth, but also regulations. Some of that may change as well. Banks, pharmaceuticals.
Exactly. Regional banks have done tremendously well. I think the financial sector should continue to benefit from the potential for deregulation. Interest rate sensitive sectors with the potential for a lower corporate tax rate. Yeah. All of those areas should really do well.
Okay, thank you so much, Eric Parnell of Gehring Capital, for joining us today, and that's a lot to go through. So thank you. I hope you'll come back.
Thank you very much.
And thank you also for joining us on Seeking Alpha Interviews. I'm Jane King from the NASDAQ. Have a great day.